I've gradually concluded over a very long time that there's very little that we can do to cause government to shrink, to grant us our rights, to give us our liberties. We keep begging, we keep writing, we keep organizing, we keep protesting, we're voting, and nothing seems to work. Looking back at history, if you look at the people who have really obtained their freedom, it's not because it was ever given to them. It's because they took it, and they take it by acting free in their own lives.
And in the spirit of acting free, join us for We Are Libertarians' first live event, November 15th at 5 p.m. with our special guest, Jeffrey Tucker. For tickets, visit Indiegogo.com and search for We Are Libertarians Live.
Welcome to We Are Libertarians for this week. I am your host, and that voice, that little voice that you heard right before this, encouraging you to support Audible.com. Go there, download audiobooks. That was the lovely Vinny Martinez.
Well, yes.
So, Vinny Martinez kicking us off, refreshing the hat a little bit. I am Chris Spangle. To my right is Greg Lenz.
Hello, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for venturing out in the snow to get here.
Absolutely.
And then to my left is Gena Martinez.
Hello, hello.
Hello. She's forgotten.
She is Gena Martinez.
She's here. She's just not here. So, story time of Gena. Everybody check it out. Vinny sat in with an interview, and let me tell you, that Vinny, quite the ham.
Yes.
Reminds me of a 7-year-old me.
Yep.
So you have a me growing up in your house.
Oh, lucky me.
You lucky you. We're under another winter weather advisory. We're supposed to get like 12 inches of snow tonight. And how does it look out there?
It is horrible. Like I don't know. I'm honestly questioning whether we can live under anarchy because the way people were going different speeds on the roads and not in lanes, we need order.
Yeah.
We need order.
But we have lanes and we have order, and then they disobeyed it. So
yes, but it's forced order.
Right, but we'll get to you in a minute. So, as you'll notice, we have no anarchist on the panel tonight. And we want to say we didn't invite any of the regular anarchists on this podcast for a reason. Not because we don't love Maya and Dan Peffers and Chris Peffers and all the other anarchists in our world, but we've been very anarchist-heavy over the last, 3-4 weeks?
Yeah, we've been very philosophical.
Yeah, and I think the non-anarchists on the podcast need a minute to digest it a little bit. And so that is our goal, is we don't want to have to defend ourselves because anarchists are a little, even Dan Peffers, who's a sweetheart, it's a little like, well, let me tell you how it's going to be, that sort of thing. And so I think that what we want to do here today is give what are you, a constitutional Republican? Is that
I'd say I'm like a constitutional minarchist.
Okay. And Gena, do you have any idea what you are?
I am not a fan of anarchy.
Right.
Yes.
She knows this much.
I am not a libertarian, necessarily.
I don't know what you are.
You're definitely a civil libertarian.
Yeah.
I'm rather independent.
Yeah. So, and that's why we like Gena, because she challenges everybody on the show here. I am a constitutional Republican. I'm a minarchist, but anarchy makes more and more sense to me, especially when you talk to people like Jeff Tucker, Walter Block, and things sort of start to make sense. And just like I did to Greg Lenz, when you go, okay, yeah, but we have forced order, we have police departments, we have drawn-out lanes on government roads, and yet you're complaining that nobody follows those. So what, you want more force? You want more order? Or
minimum speed limits and driving order under snowy conditions.
Right. By gunfire? I mean, I don't know. So I often take a kind of different view than most people, and I look at it and I go, well, hey, and by most people I mean non-libertarians, hey, we already have that stuff, and that's not fixing what you're complaining about, so why would you want to do more of it? That may not necessarily be the solution. Maybe more freedom and more liberty is the solution. Anarchy makes more and more sense, but there are still things which trip me up. And I think that Greg and I share a lot of those things. One of the things that is really, and Gena, there's a lot of stuff that trips her up about an anarchist society.
Yeah.
And she's sort of the catalyst for this episode of venting a little bit.
Right. It was something Peffer said a couple of episodes ago, and it may have been off the air, but we were discussing, what reality would be like in his imaginary
Anarcho-capitalist
fiefdom.
society.
Yeah, and he mentioned something about if we did away with the court system and we did away with the police state system and we did away with all of these governmental agencies that we currently have in place, that we would still have those services. They would just be private services. And I couldn't help feeling like he was saying to me, you would still get fucked. You would just get to choose who you paid to fuck you. And it just, I just don't see the sense or the logic in making such a step.
Hey, I also should mention that we're no longer censoring We're Libertarians, by the way. 2 people wrote in. I offered it up to the audience. I said, hey, let me know what you think. 2 people wrote in, and they said, hey, we're all adults here. Let it fly.
There we go.
So
awesome.
the people have spoken.
Thank you, people.
The 2 out of the 1,000 and 100 some people that listen to this, 2 of you wrote in. And we know we're neglecting some of your letters. I apologize. We'll get to your questions soon. Please send more in at Spangle at WeAreLibertarians.com. Anyways, so yes, we're not censoring anymore. Suck it. But you...
Yes.
That does not mean that you get free range. Try to keep it clean. Do your best. But,
I will do what I can.
Fits of passion will hit you. So the
We're
whole
all adults here.
The whole idea of and that was sort of one of the questions that we posed to Walter Block, which was the court system, which is the main thing that I think Greg and I struggle with, is private police forces, private. I thought, okay, if anybody can explain it to me, to my little brain, in a way that I will understand and accept, it's going to be Walter Block. He is a fantastic interview. He's a very intelligent man. But he gave an answer that was what Peffers said, and no offense to Peffers, but it was, I hope that everybody by now has caught up and listened to Walter Block and Jeff Tucker and everything. But what he said is, in this society, where, okay, what are you hanging on to? And I say, okay, everything is free and open, with the exception of private courts and private police forces. I don't necessarily get that idea, okay? Total free market, total personal liberty, all of that I am for, 100%. But when it comes to the court system and how justice is handed down, if I kill your family member, what's going to happen to me, okay? And if you kill my family member, what's going to happen to you? I mean, so it's... what happens to the criminal and what happens to the family that deserves justice. And the answer was, listen, on one side you're going to have several different courts, and you're going to have rogue courts, and you're going to have courts that the majority of the society feels that this is the court that deserves legitimacy. And so it's not clean, it's not neat and tidy by any stretch of the imagination. And in defense of that view, if that court over time, like many of our courts, have become circuses or don't seem legitimate, the community can switch to a different court. You have that flexibility. But it just, the idea, I think you listen to it and sort of give your perspective on some of that.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I can very much logically break it down. And it doesn't even have to be that one court is the administrator for a community. It can be several court service providers and legal service providers within a community. And at that point, it's actually good, because then there are 2 providers competing simultaneously over customers. So you would judge them based on how... what their track record was in accordance with the views of the community, and then the market would shift towards whichever provider, but you would always have new entrants.
See, for me, letting the market determine justice just sounds like utter bullshit. There's just no way to, in my mind, there's no way to put a price, I suppose.
Oh, no, I mean the market of people's wishes. Like, for instance, let's say that one court provider had within the community standards and what the community wanted, one court provider had made consistent decisions in a direction they did not like and did not feel was fair. The best part about anarcho-capitalism is a competitor would enter into it and say, listen, here is what we can offer. We will issue rulings, and our beliefs, our judges, our prosecutors are in fact more in line with your beliefs, so we will take over and compete and force the current court system either to change, or you can give us we will accept your fees and administer justice in your community.
Right, but to Gena's point, doesn't it all eventually just come down to money and price, and the majority of communities are going to say, well, this court provider costs less, this police force costs us less, let's go with them.
I don't think so, because not everyone shops at Walmart.
Okay.
There are different needs in a society, and you have the high end. People buy Mercedes, people buy Chevy, people buy used Fiats. There's all different levels of demand within a market community, and everyone's needs are met differently.
But the problem with that is that if I drive a Chevy and you drive a Honda and she drives an Audi, that doesn't really have any that doesn't have an effect on justice.
Well, it can, because there can be, at the let's say we're just starting at the beginning, and right now we're in a community. Gena has different beliefs of what she would want in a system of justice. Mm-hmm. I do as well. Spangle does as well. We could each have our own administrator for our our levels of justice that we want.
Right,
she's our
but then
provider.
you perpetrate an offense against me. Whose judge do we go to?
Here's the difference, and this is where I break down with anarcho-capitalists, is one, the flaw of even libertarianism or anything is it expects everyone to behave rationally. Mm-hmm. It says that, well, clearly there is a market for law, so everyone will in fact join it at the right price point. When you take that line of thinking, you dismiss irrational actors. You dismiss the Jeffrey Dahmer. You dismiss, if you've seen The Dark Knight, the Heath Ledger Joker character. There are always irrational men that operate within a community. And that's why John Adams said if, men were angels, there would be no need for government. And so I don't see how any way you can actually come up with a system of anarcho-capitalist distribution of justice unless you have, to quote Barack Obama, a mandate where everyone has to be at least purchase some type of court system or legal justice system. And then there has to be a lowest common denominator of certain laws you will follow based on community decisions. But even then, you're introducing it democratically, and that's where it gets really messy.
And it's the monopolization of the force. Okay, so government force, is agreed upon as this one system. Okay, but does that mean nationally? Does that mean state? Does that mean locally? Because at the end of the day, everybody in this community agrees with this, so maybe this is a point in Block's favor, and you can clarify, help me figure this out. Because part of this episode is not to tell you what you should think. This is trying to figure out what we believe. And listen, if you think that makes us bad libertarians or weak libertarians, then find another podcast. There's plenty of people who...
There's at least two others.
they have zero questions about anything they believe, and I find it hard to accept. But so you and I, how do I put this? Okay, so who at what scale is the force monopolized? Is it a federal constitution? Is it a state? I mean, if you and I are going to agree that we're going to get society down to the bare minimum of government, mm-hmm. and the only government that is going to exist is the courts, and is the police force, at what scale is that court and police force existent? And are you even buying into that? Are you saying, listen, no, I disagree with that. I think there should be a constitution with the post office and all that kind of stuff.
What I personally believe in anarcho-capitalism are drastically different, but like an anarcho-capitalist would say that every single individual has to opt into that lowest common denominator. If they want to live within that society voluntarily, they must in fact opt in. It's like Lysander Spooner's argument. Mm-hmm. I didn't sign the damn thing.
Right. Explain that.
He argued that the Constitution of the United States was not a social contract. There's a thing called social contract theory in politics, and that's saying that the Constitution, your state constitution, your local government and laws, by you agreeing to live within that society, you have in fact signed a contract agreeing to abide by those laws. You are offered the protection of those laws, but if you don't like it, you can move. And that's something voluntarists get really upset about. Why should they have to move if they don't want to agree with the majority?
Right.
Unfortunately, the only way I can break it down is that if you don't want to abide by any community's agreed upon principles, you have no right to, in fact, continue living there. And then your option is to find somewhere more in accordance with your views.
Right.
As far as what I believe, even at that point, even if we had little very, very small groups and communities and factions that agreed, or that everyone agreed to it, it assumes everyone behaves rationally.
Right.
If there is one irrational actor going around committing crimes, going on a killing spree, it breaks down because they are, in fact, not subject to your laws because they didn't sign, to quote Lysander Spooner, the damn thing.
Right. Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Yeah, and there are those
Right.
individuals. Now, a voluntarist would probably argue, well, society created them into who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And they may very well have that point, but it doesn't get rid of the fact that they exist.
Well, and that's sort of the point. There's the more responsibility people have to take for themselves, the more rational actors there are. The more rational people become.
I don't know that responsibility makes a person behave more rationally.
I definitely would think it would.
I would. You don't? Why not?
I mean, there are men and women out there who have a tremendous amount of responsibility who don't necessarily make rational decisions. That's just a fact.
Well, but by what standard are you judging rational?
Yeah, not absolute. We just mean with more, it guides you to a point. But then I think there's a breaking point where people have so much responsibility, they will in fact go the other way just purely out of mental anguish.
Here's what I'd counter with, Gena. The difference between rational and non-rational, in my definition, is the non-aggression principle. Are you hurting somebody else? Okay, so you're a rational, responsible actor if you are not hurting anybody else. You're not stealing, you're not lying, you're not cheating, and even lying is a gray area. But anytime you're taking somebody's property, you're harming somebody else, that's irrational. And what a lot of people do is
unless you're starving and there's a loaf of bread that you can reach, and then it's a rational behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So rationality doesn't really have much to do with how you harm another person. Rationality has to do with your decision-making process.
Right.
So if you are making decisions in an appropriate manner, it really, to me, it has no direct correlation to the amount of responsibility that you hold.
There's a point. Because, like, right now, we all argue more liberty would help people. Like, right, getting rid of welfare or getting rid of certain government programs that are maybe redundant would increase our personal liberty because we'd pay less taxes, but it would put the burden of responsibility on an individual to maybe someone who hadn't been looking for a job for a while go out there and start to provide for themselves. Not to say there aren't individuals who
personally,
aren't able
I don't
to.
advocate for the absolution, I suppose, of the welfare system. Personally, I think less government, and I think that a reform is in order, but I don't think that the entire program needs to be eliminated. I think that it exists for a purpose. I think that a lot of our programs exist for a purpose. They have just gotten to a point where people take advantage of the system.
Right.
And so, but the rationality argument, and I mean, yes, you were right.
All right. It define rational and irrational actors.
It's in
from
your best
point.
interest.
And what is in your best interest? Okay, so if by your definition, a person who is starving and needs to feed their family, stealing that loaf of bread, while it is violating the non-aggression principle, it is totally rational for them to steal that because
survival is the number one motivator.
Right. Okay. So,
and that's a tremendous amount of responsibility because they're trying to help their family survive.
Right.
So, and I think that's the reason the welfare state became about, is they wanted basic necessity collectively. Like in the United States, we didn't, the Constitution, the state level constitutions, none of those had that included in there. It wasn't until Fabian socialism, and then the professor at Harvard, I forget what his name was, but he wrote, I'm having a mind blank for a second, but he essentially argued for, instead of socialism where the government owns everything, welfare liberalism where you have heavy taxation and it's administered privately.
Oh, yeah. It was Harvard professor.
Him and Nozick had these great...
Yeah, it was Hinkle McCrinkleberry.
Oh, no. I was going to say, no, but Robert Nozick that wrote Anarchy, the State, and Utopia wrote that book was a response to this individual's original book.
Well, here's a very clear example of how the welfare state kind of grew with Lyndon Johnson. Johnson grew up outside of probably 50 to 100 miles outside of Austin, Texas, right at the Austin, Texas, if you've ever been there, has this, it's flat up until you get to Austin, and then there's this ridge of mountains.
The hill country.
The hill country. And once so when people first came to the hill country, it was lush and it was green and it was beautiful. And then so they started using it as pasture land. And his family bought farms 100 miles outside of Austin in the middle of the hill country. And everything just dried up and went to crap. There was nothing regrew because it was just terrible land. And so these people had moved out to Texas hill country where he had grown up, and they ended up with no resources, and their only resource, their only claim of property in the world was that plot of land. Okay, but it was not worth anything. And so you had all these people, even up until the 1940s, 1950s, who were living in the heart of Texas in the hill country, and they had no electricity, and they're using...
This is post-Depression.
This is post-Depression. This is post-World War II even. When he was running for, this was 30s, 40s, and into the 50s. And the way that Johnson became a powerful man in Texas is he went to Washington, D.C., and forced the electric companies to put energy throughout the Texas Hill Country to help increase the land values. These were plots of land. These were people who were using outhouses and had no electricity into the 50s because the power companies just said, well, why would we run electrical lines? Because it's going to be cost prohibitive for these people. Energy is going to be so expensive to get to them that they will not be able to afford it. And we're not going to be charitable and build these lines and cost millions of dollars, which then, in today's terms, it would be billions, to get energy out to these people. They should move if they want to be in a prosperous situation. And so what Johnson did is he went and used the force of government to force energy companies to move out to the Texas Hill Country and build electrical lines, and that goosed the electrical. And he's really the reason people in the Southwest have energy. And he took that mentality to Washington, D.C., and that is where the war on poverty comes from. It helped him get elected at one point. He was a terrible person. If you read the Robert Caro biographies, they're great studies in power. LBJ, he is charming and despicable all at the same time. He's such a despicable person that I could honestly entertain the idea that he had Kennedy killed to become president. Don't know that that's true or not, but I could entertain the idea just because I read these 3 books. I'm going to read the 4th. But so... For Johnson, the creation of welfare as we know it, Medicare, Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, it was a way for Johnson to curry favor with the poor people that had supported him forever. He was going to lift them out of poverty using government programs. Part of it may have been good intentions. It certainly was for a lot of the people who passed the legislation in Congress, but it was... in Johnson's mind, the creation of the welfare state as we know it in his era in the early 60s, it was a way for him to be known forever, to be a part of the history books. It was really personal desire. So he didn't necessarily care, and it's a lot of the same thing that has gone on with Obamacare. Obama does, on one level, have a desire, but he also wants to be known for signature legislation. So it's this. He didn't necessarily... He wanted single-payer health care. He wanted Canadian health insurance. He said it a million different times. But he settled for something that was non-functional, that does not work, because it was going to be his signature legislation that he will be known forever. So part of my problem with the welfare state, you don't have a problem with the intentions. And I don't really either. Because who wants to look at a family, who wants to look at the people in the Texas Hill Country and say, I'm sorry, we can't bring you power. You're just going to have to give up what little left you have in the world and move to Austin to get a job. And that may be the best course of action for them. That may have, at that point, been the best course of action. Give this up because this is worth nothing and go and start producing something a little bit better. It's cold and callous to say, but in the long run, it might be better.
Or, because energy companies are always state-sanctioned and subject to state regulation, remove that, and an entrepreneur with an energy company might move out there and have an innovation that services that need.
Maybe they would have.
Maybe, but
this
it's not
is how
guaranteed.
I know I'm not a libertarian. I don't think capitalism is the solution to anything. I think capitalism is the reason that we have so many problems.
No, crony capitalism is the reason we have so many problems.
No, excessive greed, which is bred by unregulated capitalism and absolutely exasperated by monopolization. I think that gets us into more trouble. I think that the reason that we encountered the Great Depression had more to do with the monopolies that tycoons had at the time on major industry than any other situation that we ran into.
Yeah, but
they competed each other completely out of business. It's not as though capitalism is utter freedom. It's not as though anarcho-capitalism is complete freedom for the people. It's as though anarcho-capitalism is a manner of unregulating what few protections the common person has to protect themselves from the wealthy.
Right, but what you're assuming that government is always going to have good intentions.
No, I'm
because,
not. But you're assuming that the businessman and the market are going to regulate the intentions of the businessman.
No,
self-regulate.
No, it's not. It's not even self-regulating. It is the free market when it is truly free. Okay, when the market is truly free, people can't control it. Okay, man cannot control. It's like gravity. It's like the movement.
Man can control what he purchases.
Yes, but it becomes so big and so complex that man can't control it. And you can try and control it. It's like a river. You can try and dam it, but eventually over time that's going to break down. The problem with your argument is that when you break down a monopoly is just some businessman that bought off enough of the government so that he is the only person. He's protected. He is the only person that is. So the problem is that people... I don't look at the government and I don't look at the corporations as two separate entities. I look at them as the same fucking thing. I mean, there's a reason that Jeff Immelt of GE is one of Barack Obama's key advisors. It's one of the largest companies in the entire world. And so, of course, he has an office in the White House because he has major contracts that he has to get through the government. And so it's easy to walk down, knock on the door of Barack Obama and said, hey, I need this passed. So what we have is not capitalism even, really. It's more along the lines of a light state-controlled economy. We're sort of like China light at this point.
Well, China's, in the rankings, free market rankings, China's ahead of us.
Right.
Singapore's ahead of us.
And so what we have now is we have the same group of people. If you're not in the corporate world, you're in the government industries, and you're helping your former corporate friends along. What we're talking about is not having an entity that can be bought off or controlled. So yes, there can be a GE, a major conglomeration, which you have to keep in mind, those corporate structures that are built are defined by government. GE is not created by the free market. GE has been created by special favors paying off politicians to create that corporate structure.
Limited liability companies.
Right.
So that the actual people who commit the acts are never held responsible. Look at the mortgage crisis. Angelo Mozillo bought off Chris Dodd with a sweetheart loan and tons of campaign contributions, knowing they were offering loans to people who had no shot at ever repaying them, and they just foreclose and do it again.
And then who pays the price? We're still paying the price. And that's where I disagree with your point of view. We're talking about something that cannot be controlled. We're talking about if a company... The difference between government and a corporation. Corporations may be bad. Corporations may be large and evil. But you can just choose not to do business with that corporation.
Sort of, unless that corporation is the only one that offers something that is critical or vital to your survival.
Sure. But in a world like Jeffrey Tucker talks about, where there's no intellectual property, where there is no copyright, where there's no trademark, you're constantly having to innovate. You're constantly having to change. So a company like Lily's, they control your destiny with something like Paxil, or they have control of that to recoup their costs. But in a Jeffrey Tucker world where there is no government to say that you have protections on this certain item for 75 years, that doesn't exist in the world that we're talking about.
See, now copyright and patent, I don't think is leading to the downfall of the market necessarily. I mean, I can understand what you're saying. Competition would defer price.
Right. It's another control that the government has put in place on the marketplace. That's what I'm saying. Copyright and patent is.
The real issue.
Well, let her.
But that's a matter of an individual or a corporation that creates and produces something, maintaining their autonomy over the product that they create or produce. I don't think we should all just be able to rip each other off and walk out and sell, bargain basement prices. That to me is a lack of integrity, and I think that's something like that would run rampant if we didn't have a structure in place like copyright or trademark patent.
The real problem with that, though, is the companies that have truly something proprietary and don't need protection never get it patented. They just keep it secret. They know that's the only way. Like if you file for a patent on something with the federal government, those systems can be hacked. That information can be accessed. Nestle's chocolate has never published their recipe. All workers, if they're involved in production, work in separate departments, and they sign explicit privacy contracts. Apple Computers is the same way. You cannot guarantee that with a patent, the ability, when you file for one, the ability to stop competition. If you've ever seen Armageddon, I know this is a movie, but
total Creighton move there.
But no, Bruce Willis files a patent for a special kind of drill. When they know the asteroid's heading for Earth, what's the government do? They open up the archives and read, this guy named Harry Stamper has developed a drill that we think will work on this type of asteroid. So what do? They go and spend 12 months trying to rebuild it. Can't do it. That's why they contact Bruce Willis, because he was the idea and the mind behind it. If he had just kept it up here, kept it a secret,
the Earth would have been destroyed.
The Earth would have been destroyed, and Ben Affleck never probably has a movie career as a blockbuster star.
Well, and not everybody is going to rip everybody else off.
But they are.
But there are advantages to innovation. I mean, you look at the idea that Steve Jobs and Wozniak created. Yes, Bill Gates did something very similar and something different and created a mega corporation. Apple and Steve Jobs with things like the mouse, they're doing okay by selling Magic Mouse for $75, but it has a lot of different knockoffs that have created a lot of other jobs. And so when you look at the very end of that line, because they were the first to put out the mouse, they spread this idea of this little gizmo that helps you control the visual browser that they also created, and those have been copied. Well, you could go work at a mouse factory. Who cares if it's for Dynex? Maybe you're like the most amazing employee at Dynex,
right? But
and then you can go work at Apple. You could go work at Dell to make.
We're
mouses.
Saying that now that mice have been on the market for the last 20 years.
Please, mouses.
Now that they've been on the market for the last 20 years, but at the time that they were developed, when, let's say, for example, Apple was a startup company trying to survive, if, say, the GEs of the world came in, swooped in, took the technology and took it to an offshore manufacturing facility, made it for a quarter of the price, came back and sold it for a quarter of the price.
Right.
Then we have no mouse. We have no Apple. We have no iPhone. We have no survival of the original organization. The people whose thought had produced such an item are completely put out of business because they tried to make it with integrity on American soil, which would produce more American jobs than jobs overseas.
You sound like one of those people who hate the Coke commercial.
I do not hate the Coke commercial.
Just kidding.
I didn't even see it.
All right. First, let me say that the mouse might be a bad idea because the mouse is the idea of an employee that worked for Apple and didn't make billions of dollars on the idea of the mouse. It was the property of the corporation, similar to what happened to Tesla and Edison.
Yikes.
Okay.
So there, the corporation
hold on.
is ripping off the individual.
Here's the counter to your argument.
Okay.
That hypothetical that you outlined happens with government or without government. It's the cost of doing business.
But the trademark or the patent in that situation is the only safeguard to make sure to give a corporation, I guess, a sense of retribution or a sense of recovery. So in the event that a GE comes in, initially swoops up the design, takes it to an offshore manufacturing facility, makes it for super cheap, brings it back. If Apple can prove that they stole the design from the original Apple patent or the original Apple trademark or whatever it is that they would have filed on its behalf, then they have a recourse. I'm sorry, they have a path of recourse in order to recuperate some of the expense or costs that they will have lost.
Right. Go ahead.
So, sorry, there's just like a few things, and I'm just trying to help you flesh it out, because I think you're going to agree with this. It's just the perspective. Right now, you're looking at it from the creator's perspective. And you're looking at it from an American perspective in the idea of American jobs.
Right.
Right? When I think the real Gena Martinez is probably it probably matters most to her what's best for the individual, but on a collective basis. Like what, for instance, the mouse without patents, without the government, where Steve Jobs or whoever at Apple ends up creating the mouse, if he keeps
Billy Elliot.
Yeah, so if he keeps it up here and doesn't ever tell anyone, maybe it's not reverse engineered and somebody rips it off like a GE. If they are ripped off, who benefits? So let's say Apple's charging $50 for their mouse. Who benefits if GE or whoever makes the exact same thing and sells it for $5?
It's arguable at that point.
No, but wouldn't it benefit you?
No, not. I can see where you're saying it would benefit the consumer to have a cheaper product, but does it benefit the collective, the whole, the world as a whole? Because there's someone in an offshore manufacturing facility working for pennies on the dollar because we know that we can ship it off to those places, and what type of quality of living does that individual have?
But it's better than if they don't have that job.
Hey, I'm
period.
not a Walmart shopper. I'm not the guy who's like, well, it's cheaper, ergo.
And
I'm
not blaming you. This is all like very theoretical.
Right,
so I'm not
right.
trying to attach anyone's like personal beliefs. I'm just trying to think it through. Like if I can get something cheaper that has the exact same functionality, the exact same guarantee, and it takes less of my fixed income, I'm doing it because that frees up income for me to spend on other things.
But if you're the creator and you want to maintain the integrity of your product and you keep it at a higher price,
then you ask the government to protect you because that's the only protection you truly have.
Precisely.
Right? And then I know one of the other things with free market capitalism that's an issue is theory and practice. So ideally in capitalism, you never have to worry about an FDA. You never have to worry about an EPA. You never have to worry about any of these governing bodies because
now that's terrifying to me. And now I will be the very first one to admit and acknowledge that the EPA and the FDA do not operate optimally.
I'm just saying any government body that is efficient at what they do. In theory.
Name one.
I know, but
that's the
but in
problem
theory.
that we're having.
Yeah.
See, in my opinion, the market has become too involved in the government structure for the government structure to be productive at what it is that they are assigned to do.
I don't know that government can ever be good because they're always playing catch-up. It's the position of trying to... They're not aware of what the market's doing or what new products you have on the rise. They're always coming from behind to try to get up. And that's just the government in general. Whereas with the market, if let's say Lilly comes out with a new drug, and that new drug helps with prenatal development, stops a whole myriad of diseases because it helps in the womb for the body to develop, and under the government, they'd be protected. It has to go through all the FDA steps. That's the vetting process. Whereas in a totally free market, they would only be able to compete on their reputation. And if they make one misstep, nobody buys their products unless they do extremely discounted, unprofitable pricing. So the free market, actually in this case, yes, it would pull out the better product. It would pull out because people would compete on long-term interest
But without the
and
FDA,
profitability.
in the example that you gave, without the FDA, you have children of thalidomide. You have all types of situations where, with no regulation, with no structure, no governing body to make sure that the product being released is safe, you take a tremendous amount of risk. And
You do, right?
yeah, absolutely.
And what is the primary goal of every individual, every company, period? It's survival. So if you are the CEO and you are aware that this may have products or this may have side effects, death, anything may result, if you are truly, and without the government protection, without capped court rulings for reimbursement, you can't let that thing hit the shelves. Because you have to act in your self-interest.
And you can spend tons of money to suppress the truth, which happens all
with
the time.
a government, not without a government.
No, in both situations.
The tech industry is a very good example here because it's evolved so fast. I mean, Facebook is like 10 years old today. I mean, it's hard to think of a time without Facebook. The iPhone, we're on the...
It's not that hard to think of a time without Facebook unless you're 7.
Well, seventh generation iPhone or whatever it is. This is the 6th generation. That's only, 4 or 5 years old. It evolves very quickly. Apple came out with this product, the iPod, 10 years ago?
2001.
2001. They come out with the iPod. It is a great product. Doesn't matter if they have patents or not. They're such an innovative company. They're such a revolutionary company. They have so much of their stuff together that they can bring out products. They can evolve products. They can make it better. iTunes and the iPod and the iPhone are still the standards. And Android and Google is certainly catching up in the phone department. But think about back in the day. What happened if you owned a Zune? Did you ever own a Zune?
I didn't, but I saw them sold.
Right. Did anybody own an iPod?
Yeah.
Yeah. All three of us owned an iPod. I've owned several in my lifetime because it just was a better product.
Well, it was the first. It was the first.
It was the first, and so they were able to get a jump.
That was the one you purchased because it was what you had available.
It was first, and then because they were first to market and they could evolve it quickly because they were learning from their mistakes faster than everybody else, their product has survived, and the Zune is gone. The Zune platform is gone. Microsoft is still trying to catch up.
Yeah, but we're assuming that it was the market that determined the survival of the Zune and not some other corporate
The
warfare.
survival of the iPod? Or?
Other than consumer demand
there
for
are many
products
things
like
other
that.
than consumer demand that dictate whether or not a product survives.
This is the closest thing that we have to a free market. It's this tech period, this time where we have the internet completely unregulated and free to innovate.
I agree with the lack of regulation within the internet. I do think that there should be... I do think that there are instances where people are defamed or otherwise treated with such abusive... in such an abusive manner that they should have legal recourse. I do think that should be addressed. But as far as the internet goes and the accessibility to the internet and what you're capable of publishing on the internet, I think that should be free of government tampering. In fact, I think that the recent decision where Verizon had the streaming, do you guys know what I'm talking about? The streaming affected. I think that's borderline criminal. But as far as the market goes, as far as the products go, as far as the material side of things not being the internet side of things, I don't think that regulation harms us as a population.
I would definitely say it does because it's impossible for the regulators to be good at what they do. The
It's
FDA,
not impossible. It's just not currently.
it's not economically feasible because, for the FDA to be as good at what they do, to be great at what they do, and really protect us before products hit the market,
Right.
the costs would be prohibitive. You would not do it. Anyone that did do it would have to be so well financed, they would already be a monopoly regardless. The SEC,
For example, so give me an example of what you're talking about here. So So what you're telling me is that in order for the FDA to be effective, it would be so cost prohibitive. In what
Let's say it's beef.
Okay.
If we were really that nervous about mad cow, the FDA would have to actually inspect every single cow instead of one of 500 that comes in. So they would have to inspect every single one. Now, the meat company isn't going to be able to stay in business.
That's because we have major meat corporations who I mean, the meat industry is going to hate me for this, but everybody knows it to be true. They perpetrate atrocities at this time.
Well, I got to shut you down. The meat industry is a huge sponsor of this podcast.
Well,
please,
I'm just
stop.
saying it made Oprah some friends.
Yeah.
Well, all I mean is,
Dr. Phil.
I mean, it's hard to separate the two because, like, yes, and like I don't agree that we can have especially in an interim. Like, let's say tomorrow we just had no more regulators. People act irrationally, especially in short term. There's always snake oil salesmen. So if we got rid of the FDA, someone would see the opportunity to make a quick buck.
See, from my perspective,
Or somebody would look to make an honest buck, and there would be an Angie's List or
over the long run,
or consumer reports for various industries,
and you would pay for that service. But I mean,
Right.
in the short run, that's where the practicality really comes in for me. Can I imagine a purely free market society? Sure, but it'd almost have to be like on Mario. You'd have to hit the reset button, start completely fresh.
my situation is the current, I guess from my perspective, the current situation that we're in is that we have major, gigantic industries that are so out of balance with the development of society, that are out of balance with the development of the planet, that our major industry at this point has driven our planet to a point where we don't have many of our natural resources to fall back on. We are at a point where our water system is at it's just in jeopardy. We are at a point where our air that we breathe is no longer has a quality of like we can't continuously perpetrate these types of industrial abuses
Misuse.
against ourselves and expect to survive.
The reason that happens, though, is with water. Necessary for human life,
Yes, it is.
right? Who controls the utility companies?
Depends upon where you live. There are citizens united action groups that have their own citizens.
But ultimately, there's a governing body, either privately or publicly, right?
Well, there's also a private industry.
Or yeah, there's not for water. That's one of our utilities. So there's no.
But here's the situation.
No, that's not true. What happens is
They're still
there's
run for
districts.
profit.
Like Vallejo Water, for instance, is a French company, and that's been sold off. The water rights in parts of Indiana have been sold off so many times.
But why
that
are we
finally-
selling water?
that
That's
finally-
the absurdity.
Right.
Is that it's the capitalism. It's the quest for money. It is the putting a price on the Earth's resources. That who the fuck gives you the
It's not about
permission to
it's
fucking
not
own
about
them?
it's not about money.
Yes,
'Cause
it's absolutely
no,
about money.
it's about power. It's about control.
So who on earth grants you the right to state that you can stake a claim to a river?
Look, listen to Walter Block over here. Now you've got it.
Yep.
Who told you that you were in control of the water? Who told the government they were in charge of the water?
The
Okay.
situation is if we as citizens don't stand up and make proper decisions on our own behalves, we're going to be fucked.
And
that's not a level of responsibility. That's a level of responsibility that's been stripped from us, not by government, but by corporations in this particular instance.
fault. Not
It's actually
true.
government.
It is government and corporations, but especially government. Government is the one
Creates corporations.
it created corporations.
Well,
it creates
and-
the environment in which these things grow up.
The first corporation was the East India Trading Company. The reason it was created, they wanted liability protection for the owners from any shipments that went missing, for any sailors or employees that died. They didn't want the officers didn't want to have to be personally responsible to care for the families of the workers. They needed that liability protection, so they created the world's first corporation. When those sailors died, they could sue the corporation, but it could never be the assets of the owners. That's why we have corporations. They're government-created entities, and it's all about asset protection for the individuals. If you take that away, everyone acts in their own survival and long-term self-interest, because any wrong decision you make hits you immediately in your pocketbook. On Wall Street, there used to be a bank called Salomon Brothers. It's who Michael Bloomberg worked for. It was a limited partnership. When it went bust, all the partners went bust. Today, there's no more limited partnerships on Wall Street. They're all C corporations. The reason why, any money they make while they're with Goldman Sachs, Lehman Brothers, anyone like that, personally is completely protected from going back to the people they screwed.
Right. And that was because of government regulations that they fixed.
Yep.
Now, you and I both live in Greenwood. We both live in apartment complexes. I don't pay water. I pay for water, but I pay... Okay, so you pay a bill. Mm-hmm. Who do you pay your bill to?
Honestly, I believe I pay it directly to my apartment company, but they give me a statement claiming.
Okay, so we both are in the same situation. Everybody who lives in Greenwood pays the same water company. Okay, now granted, water is a difficult utility to, you can't. What are we going to have? A separate water company bringing a pipe into apartment B and apartment C?
There's economies of scale.
Right. Now, for a cable, why am I only allowed 2 cable choices? Why am I only allowed 2 internet choices?
See, now,
so, hold on. The question to you is, who decided that they were... I can't even ask the question. The point is, we have the same water company in Greenwood, and it's the same water company that Brown County has, that Jeffersonville has down by the Ohio River, which is that's a 2-hour drive. Why do we have the same water company? Who put themselves in charge of that decision? Who made that decision for you and I that those are the water companies that we would be working with? Who created the water rights to sell in the first place?
See, I can't answer that. My situation is, I believe that government can be a solution to that problem. It doesn't even have to be called a government, a collection of people.
A governing body.
Who can act in their own best interest. For example, right now, the water purification systems that we have in place on a large scale municipally are just piss poor. Mm-hmm. I'm from a small town in southern Indiana, and there are places in that river where raw sewage just dumps right into the river. And I know that there are places like that in Indianapolis as well. To me, that's disgraceful. All we would need to do to solve a tremendous amount of water issues is to put into place a UV system, which is far more efficient, which takes care of just a tremendous amount of more bacteria.
If a competitor came in and offered that with a UV system, would you buy from them or would you buy from who you have now?
Would I have the opportunity? Would I have the choice?
Yeah, if a competitor, like, let's just say hypothetically moved in, would you buy from them or would you buy from...
Hypothetically, if I were capable, and this is where I have issue with capitalism, because if it were cost prohibitive and I was not capable of buying from them, I would be very pissed off that the wealthy people in my area were afforded a quality body of water, whereas I was stuck with the antiquated system because I couldn't afford the natural resources that shouldn't have been fucked by the corporations that did the fucking damage in the first place.
So wouldn't you, as a person who is self-interested, the person who loves the We Are Libertarians podcast and hears that and goes, we got to start figuring out a way to make our stuff more affordable so we can get into more homes. That's what's happened with Uverse. That's what happened with... that's what Google Fiber is doing with the internet, with laying internet cables. You're so close.
The internet doesn't concern me nearly as much as drinking.
And there are two different things. There are vital resources that you need for survival,
right.
And then there's other products.
You are so close to being on the same page with us. It's scary. You're just not. You have it like 4 days from now. You're going to go, oh fuck, I totally get that. The reason that a corporation can buy a corporation like Viola, which is a French company, can buy our water rights is because the government decided that was an asset they could sell. Did you and I, as residents of Greenwood, decide that was something that they could sell? Did you vote on it? I sure as hell didn't.
Right.
And that was a decision that was made 30 years ago, long before we ever came here. The people who were a part of that community that made that decision no longer are alive, or they're no longer in power. So think of how difficult it is for you and I to go to the Greenwood Town Council and have that changed, and how difficult it is to go and get everybody else to make that, to help change that situation.
To even care
about that certain thing. So if we were all, as a group, trying to decide if Polo Run, where I live, if we had a meeting once a year, are we going to renew the contract with this water company? Well, all my hair fell out, and it tastes like chemicals, so no. You would be able to make that decision on a yearly basis, and you would be responsible for that decision, and people would come and sell to you. Yeah, guess what? There would be people trying to sell you on the quality of their water, their services. You know, you care about UV killing bacteria. We have that service. These people, yes, they may be cheaper, but they aren't going to protect your drinking water. Yeah, we're going to have to sit through a few pitches in an afternoon, but we're going to make the decision on what we're putting in our body. You know, there are people who might not like fluoride in their drinking water. So that is what we're talking about. We're talking about a society where, yes, you have to make more decisions for yourself, but what is the problem with that?
It drastically increases the quality of your living when you have competitors for your essential services to an extent.
Right, because they're going to find ways to make it more affordable to you.
Well,
right
I don't
now,
disagree with the fact that if
that could hypothetically exist.
Okay, so hypothetically, while I don't disagree with your hypothetical that more competition creates better quality of services, my concern is that hyper-competition, which is a state that, especially in this nation, we just constantly exist in hyper-competitive situations, constantly. How can we most fuck over our neighbor in order to make our own buck? It is literally the phenomena of the almighty dollar that is the downfall of this society, particularly in America. It's like, what are you worth to me? Nothing. Well, then fuck you. Your value of life is not of my concern.
But what is a dollar? Let's go all the way through it.
Okay,
what is a dollar? What's it represent?
It's a representation of accumulation.
No, like it's just a currency, right?
Sure.
Right. So what do we use it for?
Trade,
exchange.
Sure.
Right?
It's a bartering
Instead
system.
of you and I trading like a chicken and a hog or
Right.
corn, we use this instead.
Right.
So now, let's say we don't have the dollar.
Okay.
Is it the pursuit?
It's the hyper-competitive attitudes that we have towards one another instead of a cooperative attitude.
So
our
that's your
quality
issue.
of life would improve drastically if people could cooperate more than compete.
So you like more of an idea of, here's the perfect example, because James Neese is a mutualist. So a mutualist says that, in fact, like you said, how can you own the earth? How can you own water? How can you own the water supply, right? That's something that's so vital to human existence. Clearly it should be need-based and not based on want. Is that more in line with what you were thinking?
No, I don't think it should be need-based or want-based. I think that I just think it takes a tremendous amount of audacity to declare myself owner of this body of water, or just sole distributor of this, combination of hydrogen and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's absurd.
So how would you get access to water if the government doesn't, let's say the government doesn't own it?
Wells, rivers, the same way that it should have been possible before these things were corrupted by in the industrial period.
Yeah, like definitely you have issues with the corporations and not meeting. The thing is, they're subject to government guidelines which aren't being enforced.
They are now, but they weren't before. And they aren't being enforced because the government is lifting them. Bush, for example, took the scrubbers off the coal burning plants. That fucked up the air quality like you couldn't imagine.
Yeah, but you look at the Deep Oil Horizon, that accident occurred not because of a lack of regulation. It occurred because the Gulf oil spill occurred because the government didn't have enough inspectors to go and look at that properly.
No, it occurred.
And secondly, the
you can't blame
BP.
You cannot blame the people who should have caught the problem for causing the problem. The problem was caused by BP.
Okay, so
But the government
that's
didn't
circular
catch
logic
it in time to to prevent it.
Right. You're saying that...
I'm saying that without that government official being there, it still never would have happened if BP hadn't done it.
I'm saying that the government official existing did nothing to stop or start that problem.
He was
irrelevant. Why pay for him?
He had to do 55 inspections, 55 rigs in a month. And he had done like one, and he'd only been on the job like 30 days.
It does not make sense to you and I to pay for something that is inefficient and does not work.
See, for me, I'm not pissed off that I paid for it and it didn't work in that situation. I'm pissed off that I paid for his boss who didn't staff that properly.
He didn't have the resources. He probably asked for them, and we just didn't have the money.
Right.
Because we have the welfare state and entitlements.
We've got to wrap up because the weather's getting bad and other stuff. But...
now that we've pissed off everyone with money who's
not true.
No,
we're trying to.
I'm thinking of a more immediate situation that I've got to deal with.
Yeah.
So you talk about having more of a communal spirit versus a competitive spirit. Yes, there is competition for
cooperative spirit.
Right.
It doesn't have to be communal because that sounds all communisty, and I don't want you guys putting the socialist label on.
No, because I'm totally in agreement with you.
Okay.
In my situation where we are hearing pitches for water every year, I would actually know who my neighbors were, and I'd have a connection with them. And yes,
and you could cooperate to get a quality product.
And there is competition for our business, but the guys who are selling water to communities probably know each other, and they probably get along too, and they win some, they lose some. It doesn't sound so bad and so threatening. At the end of the day, it sounds better because you're going to actually know that I'm going to know who lives upstairs. I know who lives upstairs.
But in that particular instance, my UV solution is expensive.
Right.
And if you have two organizations each trying to pay for a UV system, you are dividing the wealth that should be available to a geographical area.
No,
so let's say in this geographical area we have 100,000 citizens.
Mm-hmm.
If two companies come in and each of them finances whatever is necessary.
Let's say UV just for sure.
Yeah, it is necessary to purchase a UV system. Then you've bought it twice when the area really only dictated one. So in that case, you're not helping yourself by having more competition. In that case, you're just fucking yourself by not having enough cooperation.
No, because
then someone else would develop a competitor to that solution at a cheaper price.
But do they have
and
to?
Also, people you wouldn't buy it twice. And secondly,
but the corporations are each buying it.
Yep.
Yes, but that increases.
Even though it's not called for.
But that increases demand, which means that more people are being hired to make the UV program.
As far as the circular logic goes, we're still back to the situation where the almighty dollar is destroying society.
But a dollar is just a means of exchange, right?
Yeah.
This is what you got to get. So if we take the dollar out,
okay,
is the pursuit of me raising chickens the cause of the society falling down?
The situation is if the UV filter cost 400 chickens and we have 100,000 people that can be sustained off of 400 chickens and you bring in a competitor who's also going to spend 400 chickens, we've now invested 800 chickens in a situation that called for 400 chickens and we're 400 fucking chicken stupid.
I feel like Vinny just created that whole...
But right, that's perfect because you're exactly right. Price determines how efficiently we use resources. The reason water problems we're having right now is because we aren't pricing water highly enough. Think about it.
I disagree with that completely because what you were saying is people in poverty don't deserve to drink.
Not true.
And at that point, you have people in poverty who are you don't have people in poverty because they're dead.
There are business models.
It's euthanasia.
Hold on. There's business models where you can cross subsidy. It's not like if everyone has to pay the top price for like $7 for a gallon of water when we know it's an essential necessary for human life and people definitely can't afford it. There are so many business models that exist where you do cross subsidies, where your most intense users, where you make all your ads revenue, like people that search on Google all the time, end up subsidizing people that have Gmail accounts but maybe use Yahoo to search. So with water, a competitor would come in and say, listen, we're going to charge people maybe based on income. We're going to charge people maybe based on usage. We'll charge everyone the same up to an extent. Then, if you use more than X, you pay a little more. If you use more than that, you pay more. And it scales up. And the reason why is that price signals usage. So if you're the provider and you know that, man, our supply is getting low, what do I need to do? I definitely need to raise the price because that resource is becoming more scarce and I am putting in jeopardy how I'm able to meet the needs of humanity.
Okay, so let's use an example that I can't even believe I'm going to throw out there. Let's say that Duggar woman who has 25 kids, right?
Right.
You can tell I'm her biggest fan.
Woman, it's a vagina, not a clown car.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
God forbid her husband gets hit by a car tomorrow. She has no means of income. She has 25 kids. They all need showers. They all need to drink. I don't want to see Duggar children going tank girl.
Poverty's terrible for liberty, by the way.
And so at that point, she's got a tremendous amount of consumption, very little income. How does your subsidy fix her situation?
How does my subsidy? Because she would pay the same price as everyone based on what she actually needed per individual in the house that this provider offers for living, to be able to live, right?
So they would run around stinky, but they wouldn't die of thirst.
There would certainly be...
And there's different models. Like, maybe as your community has decided if you wanted to use that provider, that you guys would, in fact, all right, listen, there's a list. We know who is really hurting financially. It'd be cooperative. We will actually pay for X for their water so that she can get as much as she needs.
There's, and this is the final point before we go here. There are two charitable options, okay? And this is what happened 100 years ago. This is what happened 50 years ago until the modern welfare state. You had the mutual aid society or you had the township trustee. And the mutual aid society would say, yes, we understand your situation, we appreciate your situation, and we want to help because we want to be charitable. Maybe it's like the Shriners or the Freemasons or the Lions or a church or a not-for-profit. It could be anything. It could be religious, non-religious. That is what a mutual aid society is. There's what is it? Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan, is that the New York
Health Insurance Exchange on Reason. Check that out, and that'll explain what a modern mutual aid society looks like. The township trustee system. The reason we have townships is because it was a close form of government, and the government welfare of 100 years ago was the township trustee. You, single mother, go to the township trustee and you say, I can't feed my kids, I can't clothe my kids, I can't pay the rent this month, whatever situation you're having that month, he broke his arm, I can't pay this bill. We pay into the township trustee pool of money. The township trustee makes a home visit, they look around, they say, yes, your situation is legitimate, I will take care of you, I will help you, and here's X amount of money. Now, you can only use that so often. It doesn't become a lifestyle. It's not something that you're on forever. It is a need-by-need basis, and you can't abuse it. You can't live off of it. But it is that leg up to kind of help you get over those hurdles, because you've been in these situations. I've been in these situations. You're rich. But
fuck you.
Right. You're cool. I'm cool. Fuck you. But sometimes $100 just makes all the difference in a world. And, $200 or helping pay that speeding ticket or helping pay for that light bill, that is what is going to change your financial course when you're in a situation. That is what the township trust. Just temporary stability is a great word. Now, the Tippecanoe County, Tippecanoe Township up in Lafayette, where Purdue is, she was the one who explained, because I never knew what a township trustee was until she explained it, and she said, listen, we get 900 requests a month, and I grant 200. We said, well, what about the other 700? And she says, we show up, they have 4 cars, they have got a flat-screen TV, they're living in a McMansion, they just want, or they're very clearly just trying to abuse the system. They have things that they can sell. There's sacrifices that they can make. Oh, yeah. They're not serious about financial stability. They're just not.
And to that end,
out.
I've been on toy drops for Angel Tree situations, and you get to the welfare recipient's home, and they've got gold teeth and spinners on their SUV, their Cadillac, and I mean I've experienced that too. There are definitely people who take advantage of the system, but it's to say that government needs to do away with the system is just extreme to me, because there are people who are still legitimately struggling in those positions.
I personally have no problem with the township trustee welfare system, because that is face-to-face, that is personal, that is something that
it does
provide
more accountability.
More accountability.
Yeah.
I don't welfare state, really, that's where you get that dual-class mentality right now, every dollar we spend on welfare in taxes, only 43 cents of it ends up going out to help the individual.
Right, because we're paying overhead on all of the employees.
Exactly. And it actually exploits me from you, because instead of me just helping you and seeing you as a citizen, someone I care about in my community, I'm like, God, where's my money going? It goes off to DC, and then they go help the people that are, the poor people that just want to stay at home all day.
All of a sudden, the Obama phone people aren't people that you care about or relate to. They're jokes that you make. Well, frankly, I don't find, the Obamacare phone thing is kind of a funny line, but there are people who are legitimately, I don't know. I just...
No,
anyway,
it exploits man from his fellow man.
All right,
it really does.
Wrap up. Anything you'd like to promote? Anything that you'd like to... Anything you feel like you didn't get across?
Yeah, but we'll probably come back to it a million times in future episodes, assuming none of us is droned between now and then.
Hopefully. God willing. Trust me.
I'm just saying, once you made a tag, every NSA hat, every NSA
thanks, Spangle.
buzzword.
No problem.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Greg?
No, I will say, I wrote about this once, and I think no one ever read it. It was why Karl Marx and communism, that idea of cooperation, is exploited in the welfare state. And maybe I'll throw it up with this when we send out this podcast. You might find it interesting.
Oh, we should have probably discussed the fracking situation in one of the Virginias that went down recently.
We talked about that with Walter Block.
Oh, my bad.
All right, thanks.
At least you covered it.
Thanks for joining us here on the We Are Libertarians podcast. As always, we promise
to do better next time.
Music for We Are Libertarians is provided by Hoosier musician Brian Keith Wallen. Please check out his website, briankeithwallen.com. The song is Bad Spell.